Williamson in the house, and I think many of you guys are very excited about this. In fact, I'm going to send some tweets out that Neil Williamson is in the house. Neil Williamson is in the house today! Exclamation point. Tweet send. Give the show a like and a share. He's the president of the Free Enterprise Forum. He's an A-plus guy. He's the king of content. We very easily could have dubbed him the king of pop culture because most of his analysis and content has just fabulous pop culture references. They may be from the 90s and early 2000s, but I certainly appreciate them. We can talk anything you want. We have someone on the show that is as well-read, in fact, I'll say more well-read than yours truly, and he certainly is incredibly civically engaged. My friend, before we start the show, do you care to wax poetically on any topic before the cameras go on?
Sure. Well, I would like to say that tonight's going to be a late night. 10:15 ESPN2. The Tribe is in the quarterfinals for the FCS championship.
William and Mary Tribe. We both have ties to Williamsburg. His son, a talented offensive lineman for the William and Mary Tribe. Yours truly grew up in Williamsburg going to Zabel Stadium. Our family may or may not have illegally parked in the Food Lion parking lot about half a mile, 3/4 of a mile from Zabel, and then walked all up to the stadium while throwing a football with our mom and dad and my kid brother. Special times for us in Williamsburg. William and Mary football, they have a chance of winning today?
Both times that they've been in the quarterfinals, they've won, and I'm not saying we're William and Mary fans, but my son's dog is named Zabel.
I did not know that. Your son's dog is named Zabel?
Yes.
That is freaking awesome. That is the name of the stadium. Is your son's first name is?
Mark.
Mark Williamson, I love you, man. I already had a lot of respect for you as an offensive lineman at William and Mary, but the fact that your pooch is named Zabel, that makes you even cooler in my book. Jude, I see questions already coming in for the King of Content. That makes me smile. Give the show a like and a share, and if you have questions, put them in the feed. We can rock and roll when you're ready. We see the fine folks at the TV station down the street on the feed right now. Welcome, Newsroom. J-Dubs, we're in your hands. Guys, good Friday morning. I'm Jerry Miller, and welcome to Real Talk with Keith Smith. Thank you kindly for joining us. Great to connect with you guys through the I Love Seville Network, which is presented today by Keller Williams Alliance. KWA and the Keller Williams Alliance team, guys, just absolute rock stars in this game we call real estate. We are live from downtown Charlottesville. Our audience is every social media platform known to mankind, and you, the viewer and listener, can shape the discussion of today's show by offering questions, comments, concerns, and perspective in the feeds anywhere you are watching within and upon. Today's guest is someone that needs very little introduction. Not only is he the king of content, he's a media mogul. He's a wine aficionado. He's a champion of housing everywhere for everyone. And he is arguably the most civically engaged constituent in Central Virginia. His name is Neil Williamson. Why don't we go to the studio camera, Judah Whitcower, our director, and let's welcome the king of content to the show, fresh from a 7:05 appearance on Joe Thomas this morning. I mean, the dude is making his rounds. How are you, my friend?
I am well. I'm glad to be here. Happy to sit in for Keith.
Keith Smith, I should highlight that, thank you. He is doing business model projections and forecasting, and as we both saw this morning, it seems to be going fairly all right and very seriously by the text message we received this morning. Keith, we miss you. He will be back, I believe, next week on Real Talk with Keith Smith. My friend, the topic du jour on TV, in print, and on the radio and on this network has been the Free Enterprise Forum's third quarter retail report. The data suggests retail remains very strong, as your headline reads. Open-ended, where would you like to begin?
Well, the third quarter retail report, we look at year to date through the third quarter. Now remember, when we do these reports, it's always looking in the rearview mirror. It's a lagging indicator. But it's important that going into the fourth quarter, which most people recognize is the critical quarter for retail, we were ahead of last year significantly. All of the localities were ahead. One of the concerns that we have is inflation, of course, but when inflation goes up, prices go up. Guess what? Taxes go up too. In my estimation, the retail inflation is right around 5%, kind of as a thumbnail. It's 7% for when you include fuel and other things that aren't included in this report. But for all of those, all of the localities that we track are ahead of 5% in growth year over year, comparing the third quarter of 2021 to the year-to-date third quarter of 2022.
Here's the question we had. More tax revenue from sources not associated with rooftops, I find very positive.
$5 million more positive.
Very positive. Great news. I'm focused on the small business owner. Is the small business owner, for lack of better phrase, selling more widgets year over year? Or is it just a reflection that the price points are higher?
I think it's a reflection, as I mentioned, if we accept that the inflation rate is about 5% in retail, then you start to compare that year to date. Where are you compared to 2021? Only Greene County is close to 5%. I believe it's at 5.5 or 5.05% growth, $155,000. But as you look across, Waynesboro's at 6.5, but Augusta was the leader in percentage with 19.39%. That's not all increased cost. There has to be additional widgets in there. It just has to be. And so Albemarle, while it looks like second or third in percentage, was number one in dollar increase because they collect. And remember, the retailer actually collects and remits this to the state, and then the state remits it to the locality. But there is $1.9 million more in 2022 in sales tax revenue in the Albemarle County budget on the revenue side. And that's a big deal. People say, why is business good for the community? Well, that's almost $2 million that's going to support government functions. There's no restrictions on this. It goes into the general fund. And this is the local option sales tax. It sounds like an option, but it's not. One of the things that is in the legislative agenda for several localities in Central Virginia is the ability to have an additional local sales tax. Over the years, 10 localities have gone forward asking for that power to the General Assembly. And 9 of them received it. And then last year, the bill that Sally Hudson brought forward died in committee. So they were the only locality that's ever gone forward asking for it and not getting it from the General Assembly, to my knowledge.
The mayor of McIntyre, Bill McChesney, I will get to your question here in a matter of moments. Keith Smith is watching, literally as we speak right now.
Doesn't he have planning to do?
He's doing some business planning. Keith, if you would like to share the photo you shared with Judah and Neil and myself in the comment section, I think everyone will appreciate that. My friend, if you put that in the comment section. Questions are coming in quickly. Bill McChesney, Mayor of McIntyre. Neil, can you speak to profit margins with local businesses? Are profit margins expanding? That's tough to say from this report.
That's very difficult to say from this report, and quite honestly, I don't know of any report that would do that. Profit margins are something that retailers hold kind of close. I will say that when you see increased revenue, you generally start to have more elasticity in your pricing. So if your sales go up, you can raise prices. There's a balancing act. And I think that it's important to recognize also these numbers of sales tax that are by locality include internet sales, because locality sales tax is collected on internet sales since the Wayfair decision about, I guess it's been 3 years now.
We should talk about that. Amazon and businesses not tied to Central Virginia and how they are included in this. Multiple people are asking about that.
What happens when you go to Amazon to purchase something, they'll give you the price, and then when you say where you're buying it from, the billing address, that's where the sales tax goes to the billing address, not the shipping address. So in my mind, it creates a level playing field for internet retailers and bricks and mortar. Now, there are lots of other business abilities, positive and negative. Bricks and mortar, you get a whole lot. I mean, I will tell you that when I shop a local shop and I ask questions, I get better answers than if I use a chat box on an internet site. So I think the people make the difference. Shenanigans is a great local provider of toys, and I think that sometimes I get the best toys. I don't know what I'm going in for, but I leave with something that is fantastic because I've been guided by a trusted advisor, perhaps, in the toy business.
Keith wants to know about the cigarette tax and its impact on this and whether it had any impact.
The cigarette tax is not included in this. The cigarette tax is a new tax that's been collected. It's interesting. I was with an official looking at the cigarette tax. I'm the only person I think that's ever attended a cigarette tax board meeting. They're held via Zoom, and they're fascinating, trust me. But this person was saying, I think that Greene County had received 88, in the neighborhood of tens of thousands of dollars in cigarette taxes just in the time it's been in place. And now that Sheetz is closed in Greene County because they're doing a remodel, that's going to go away, because that was the main seller of cigarettes in Greene County. So this is a new revenue source that most localities did not budget for, and it has to be, the cigarette tax, unlike the sales tax, has to be spent in health care promotion, as well as dealing with the effects of tobacco use.
Neil Williamson, president of the Free Enterprise Forum. Guys, questions, put them in the feed. We're going to get to Mary McIntyre, who I follow on Twitter. She gave you props yesterday.
Available.
Seats available. In fact, she said, as Neil Williamson likes to say, seats are available here at the Albemarle County School Board meeting. Mary watches our shows. I'm going to tag her on this live Twitter stream. She was at the school board meeting yesterday. She highlighted on Twitter yesterday that there were 3 people in the audience not tied to the central office. One of them was her. She's a teacher who's very pro-union and collective bargaining. The other 2 individuals not tied to the central office at the Albemarle County School Board meeting yesterday. One of them was a student that comes to all these meetings, and the third was an individual that was running, that was looking to fill David Oberg's seat in the interim capacity, Whitehall District. Why I bring up the school board in Albemarle County is schools are going to be a hot button of the election in November of 2023. We already are seeing the school board and ACPS positioning itself in a way that it was looking for a lot more funding. We have overcrowding of schools as a hot topic. We have the need to potentially build more schools here. So before we go down that road, how do you characterize the health of Albemarle County as a jurisdiction with funding and its next budget cycle?
Well, and to be fair, the Albemarle County School Board held a joint meeting with the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors on Wednesday that I attended via Zoom. I had to be in Richmond for that. I wasn't able to attend in person. But based on the Zoom perspective, it looked like entirely staff in the audience. There may have been 1 or 2 others. But the reality is Albemarle County is a very prosperous county. Albemarle County maintains a AAA bond rating, which means they can borrow money well at great rates. And Albemarle County has floated several bonds over the years, the most recent of which was for schools and schools construction. I anticipate, based on public discussions that have been had, that there will be another bond referendum coming forward. I will say that on a politics side, Albemarle County schools were very specific in placing improvements. Last time they did a bond issuance in every school, some sort of improvement, and had those clearly demarcated. And so people knew what they were voting for, and they knew what it was, where it was. You live in Woodbrook, they're getting a new cafeteria or whatever it was that they were getting with their expansion. So I anticipate that's how that funding will occur. The CIP, which is the Capital Improvement Plan, looks forward, one of the concerns that this show has raised is, why do we wait until we have the need before we build the infrastructure? Well, I always use the Kansas City example. Kansas City built their airport to the north by about 30 miles, 40 miles, and the city grew to the south. And so now it's filling in, but for the longest time, you landed and you did not think you were in Kansas City, even though you were at the Kansas City airport. Right now, there have been improvements made for Biscuit Run in the wastewater treatment plant. Those improvements aren't going to be needed, and they're not well located, so that's why you wait. It's a challenge, and one of the other challenges is in the Virginia system, school boards do not have taxing authority, and Board of Supervisors do not have school spending authority. So you have this little dance where the school board begs for money for things that they want to spend it on, and the Board of Supervisors taxes and gives them the money, but doesn't have the ability to tell them what to spend it on. It's a very unique setup.
What percentage of the total budget is allocated to schools?
In Albemarle County, as it is in most places, but in Albemarle County, there's actually a 60% cutoff with a couple of things that come off the top. 60% of the revenue that comes into Albemarle County goes to the schools. Now, other localities don't have that, but the vast majority spend between 50 and 65% of their budget on schools. And that goes back to the days of Robert Byrd, when he was the Byrd machine in Richmond. They said, we'll take over the roads, you take over the schools. And that's where that spending demarcation occurred.
The largest allocation by far in Albemarle County is schools. And you referenced the infrastructure, the chicken and egg scenario. Should the infrastructure come first or should the housing come first? That's a reflection of the conversation we had earlier this week with the 500-plus Gray Star apartments, percolated, scuttlebutted, talked about off Old Ivy Road. Planning Commission, not early, at least in the early stages, showing signs of being in favor of this. 500 plus apartments from my standpoint, and maybe we can go back and forth, great for the sake of a talk show here. And that particular stretch of road seems to be concerning. To start with, concerning, because the infrastructure, the roads are not there yet. And we have highlighted the flooding issues under the railroad pass. And there's going to be a lot of vehicle traffic that comes with that kind of density. It's also very close to St. Anne's Belfield Academy. And at morning time and the afternoon time, when the kids come into school and leave from school, that already is a cluster duck, quack, quack, quack. Start with that topic here.
Sure. Well, let's reset the stage for where this actually is, because
Please.
I was at the meeting.
And you have a map you can put on screen, if you could.
To be clear, the Free Enterprise Forum does not take a position on projects. So we have no position on the Gray Star project. That being said, the Planning Commission did have a vote, and they voted 4-2 to recommend denial of the increase in density, the comp plan amendment. That being said, they said had VDOT, who is currently working on a corridor study in that area, and I have on good authority that staff has seen at least some of the things that are going to be in that study. Had they had that report, at least two of the planning commissioners indicated they may have been inclined to vote in favor of it. Now, the other thing to recognize is that this particular parcel marries three parcels together. The one parcel by itself has a by right ability to go up to 300, I think, or 400 units. So while folks can stand on their high horse and say, well, you're not going to get 500 units in, and you're not going to be able to build this additional taper lane, you're not going to get these other proffers, but you could go and give none of that and build the 400 some odd, and it's still going to have the same impacts. And property owners have rights. They paid for property. The people who actually, they've held it forever, but the folks that bought that property have rights to build it to the highest and best use within the code. That being said, whose responsibility is it that the railroad alignment is diagonal and is too low? And that particular intersection is not adjacent or on the parcel for this improvement. Who's responsible for that? Where is this in Albemarle County? This is in the heart of the development area.
Yeah, it's an urban ring.
And this is where
it's supposed to happen.
According to the comp plan,
yeah.
it's supposed, and by the way, it's also supposed to happen in the first comp plan in 1980, in subsequent updates in 85, 90, 95, 2000, 2005, 2010, 2015. This was always supposed to be higher density.
Thomas Rubin, welcome to the broadcast on LinkedIn. All right, I'll ask the questions that were asked of us here. I understand it's supposed to be higher density. I understand it's the urban ring. I understand this is where we want density to happen because folks potentially in this area are studying at UVA or transporting to the epicenter of employment, which is Charlottesville, and you don't want sprawl, and sprawl's not great for the environment, and this is the opposite of sprawl. The concern I have, and it's a point that you've already highlighted, the road infrastructure undoubtedly is inferior. And Judah's got the map on screen. You also have that map that you can highlight with the circle that you put around Huntington Village earlier in the week. If that's saved, you can put that on screen as well. To your point, it's not Albemarle County's responsibility to maintain and improve the roads, is what you're saying. This is a VDOT responsibility. Virginia Department of Transportation. Is that right?
If you have a road that regularly swallows SUVs in water, wouldn't that be a health safety issue?
Yeah. Okay. That's 100% would be. So you say that if this development gets green lit, that this will further incentivize VDOT to improve the road infrastructure around Old Ivy Road.
I don't know that. I do know that prior to this being moved forward through the lengthy process in Albemarle County, nothing was happening, and now VDOT is moving on a lot of things. That being said, there is a three-letter entity that owns a lot of the land on the other side that I think has some plans and don't have to go through such a legislative review.
University of Virginia, the UVA Foundation just made an announcement that the general manager of the Boar's Head Resort, which is a friend of mine, Russ Kronberg, he just got a promotion. UVA Foundation announced today. That promotion is now the director of hospitality, not just general manager of the Boar's Head Resort. And the director of hospitality, Russ Kronberg, is going to be the man that calls the shots for now Boar's Head, Birdwood, and the conference center and the hotel. So they've tabbed the general manager of Boar's Head Resort, who has 6 years of GMing Boar's Head, created a new position. This is a brand new role created, and this brand new role puts Mr. Kronberg in charge of the conference center and the hotel on Ivy Road. Where do you want to go with this here, with the emergence of Ivy Road being potentially Academic Village 2.0?
Well, I always think back to someone within the university system, senior university person, who said to me, localities have their 20-year comprehensive plans. Here at UVA, we have a 200-year plan. and I always, perspective is important. And when you look at whether you're driving down Emmett Street and you see an unusual building to have recreation in that looks a lot like an old service station, or other adaptive reuse, you know that those things aren't going to be there forever because there is a long view for where the university is going, and I would not bet against the university.
Yeah, 100%. Kevin makes a good point. Yancey, mayor of Waynesboro. The problem is, Neil, is there isn't an easy solution to remedy the road without either purchasing land or eminent domaining it. How would this be solved?
Well, I think that I think we have that situation today in that corridor right now, absent any additional development. And how would that be solved? Well, there are methods, especially solving the pedestrian issue, with a cooperative measure with the three-letter entity to make the right side of that road, I guess, more pedestrian friendly, and to create some sort of a pedestrian connection to the other side.
They're building a sidewalk.
Yeah.
That's what you're alluding to.
Yeah.
There's a sidewalk. If you guys drive down Ivy Road, you see a sidewalk connecting the Boar's Head Resort to grounds. Like, they're literally doing that right now, which I think is fantastic. And I truly believe, I caught some flack when we talked about this months ago for the first time. People are like, there's no way someone's going to walk from the Boar's Head Resort to grounds. I beg to differ. I think it would be a nice stroll if there was a sidewalk there.
I have been amazed at the distances students and others will walk, bike, and scooter.
Yeah.
It is a positive environmental benefit, and as one who occasionally has parking issues, it certainly alleviates some of the parking issues if you park way off grounds or you utilize UTS. I mean, the UTS bus running through that area also makes a lot of sense.
Lee Elberson has this. Neil Williamson is such an amazing resource for this community. That's the CEO of Claiborne giving you some
I always
props.
thought Lee was smart.
I thought Lee was smart too. Lee, we love you here on the I Love CVille Network. We love you, man. This question's come in. Jerry, ask the king, if they're calling you the king of content. I love this. Ask the king of content what you had to say about the Lewis Mountain neighborhood and how it could change into a Jefferson Park Avenue 2.0 version. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts are that change is hard, and I think we're going to see change. I believe it's going to be an evolution, not a revolution. Nothing happens absent a willing property owner. So do I think that neighborhoods will change with the new zoning code? You bet I do. Do I think we're going to see some neighborhoods densify? Yes. Will some parcels that make sense go taller? Yes. Will there be more housing? Yes. All of those things are true, but no one will be forced off their land. They will be selling at a price that they choose to accept.
That's true. That's true. We're certainly seeing that on JPA. Ran into Timmy Grossman yesterday, and we had another conversation about the success he had with his Shamrock units. Keefe says, bring this up with Neil, it's important to note if the land is owned by the UVA Foundation, it must follow the same processes as other development, but if it's owned by UVA, they don't need to follow that process. So who owns the property matters. Please bring that up with Neil.
That is accurate, and it's also accurate that the UVA Foundation pays taxes, property taxes, and those buildings that are utilized for academic purposes do not. And the vast majority of UVA's property holdings are in Albemarle County, not in Charlottesville, which is something not many people realize.
That's a very good point to highlight. More comments incoming in Fast and Furious. In regards to Ivy Road, there's a whole set of hurdles to clear in order to get the railroad to change its trestles.
The railroad is always a challenging negotiation partner and how that works. And the fact that the road went diagonally underneath is just an example of that. There actually is a statement in the 1985 rezoning for, I think it was for University Village, that suggested no more commercial activity would be done until traffic improvements were made. Unfortunately, I find that to be an illegal statement, as current boards of supervisors can't hinder future boards of supervisors from making decisions. So I'm curious about the legal standing of that, quote, proffer, but I do recognize this has been an issue since Jerry was in grammar school.
That's very true. Mr. Brian Smith has this comment. He goes, my grandparents live off Old Ivy Road in Huntington Village. Adding this kind of density to that area would make it unsafe for those living in this community, certainly the older population and the population with students. We're all for housing like Neil is, but the road infrastructure must accommodate the housing, or you're just going to impact the quality of life for all residents over there. And then he also highlights when school gets let out in that area, how difficult it is to navigate the corridor. And he says when the sun is setting in that area, it also becomes a safety hazard as well.
I completely agree, and sunglasses are important.
He says, put on your Ray-Bans, which, lower the visor. This is what Neil Williamson is saying over there. All right, so what do you make? I had this conversation with a developer 2 days ago that owns a significant portion of Fry Springs. And he made the comment that Ivy Road as we know it will be completely different in less than 10 years. You buy that?
What won't be?
He said, he used the word unrecognizable.
I beg to differ with unrecognizable. I would suggest that as you go anywhere in a growing community, things change. If 5 years ago, if I was looking for a cup of Wawa coffee, I'd be out of luck.
Wawas are everywhere now.
And here we are. These things change. And if they don't change, we may have a problem that's different. I mean, when you look at communities that are bringing in casinos to try and bring people to visit, those communities have different problems than we have. And the idea that growth happens and change happens means that people are continuing to make investments in our community to enhance the community. Now, do I love Wawa coffee? Actually, I don't. But I love having a choice.
President of the Free Enterprise Forum is a fan of the Wawa coffee from time to time, and he certainly is a fan of choices over here. The health of Albemarle County is coming up on the feed right now. You would say, how would you characterize it?
Right now, the health of Albemarle County is, I would say, the fiscal health is quite good. The political health may or may not be. I am, on this program, I've said I really, really hate uncontested elections. And folks get mad and they say, well, we've got an all one-party board. Well, you didn't run anybody last time. Quit your belly aching. Run somebody.
I think next year we're going to see a lot more contested elections. I was surprised that 9 people, you made this comment on, and got me thinking. In fact, it turned into a topic on the show. 9 people were interested in the interim spot. And you said, why are 9 people interested in the interim spot for the Whitehall School Board seat? And yet, the Whitehall School Board seat, like many others, ran completely uncontested. What does that say about elections? I'd love to hear your take on this, and that I'd love to hear your follow-up take on, do you expect more competitiveness in elections next year in an off year?
The first question first, which is what do I expect in elections? Well, you know, I'm one of those old school guys. I expect candidates in elections. I expect to have a choice between Sheetz Coffee and Wawa Coffee. I expect to have a choice between the candidates because then you have a discussion. No one runs for local office planning to ruin the community. It's differing shades and differing solutions. And so let's have that discussion. It goes back to business school where you say, sharpening the saw. Having those hard discussions matters. Why you're going to go ahead and go forward with economic development. Economic development 6 years ago was a bad word. If you said you were for economic development, you lost half the votes. So what do I think the off year election will mean? Here's what it means. Off year elections do not have statewide candidates, no gubernatorial, none of your statewide candidates, none of your legislative candidates, and none of your federal candidates. You sometimes will have a sheriff's race that really boosts those localities because those get to be fun. But I think
Commonwealth's attorney race as well.
Commonwealth's attorney's race, which only recently have become very competitive. For a long time, it was just checking the box. But what will matter is the retail politics. Because if you look at Albemarle County today, and you look at the magisterial districts, if you win the urban ring neighborhoods, you win the district. And the folks that win their urban neighborhoods will be the ones that sit in the seats.
Do you see the school board seats contested? Schools are as hot a button an issue as I've ever seen.
Well, remembering school board seats run
4 spots.
4 spots, but they run without party affiliation.
That's
officially,
true.
And without party backing. They get oftentimes someone will quietly endorse, and some folks will trumpet it and some folks won't trumpet it.
You sometimes see them on the sample ballot.
That you sometimes do. But in the grand scheme of things, since there's not that limitation, you would think there'd be more candidates. In fact, there aren't. I think it's going to be harder to have folks on the ballot, more than 2 candidates on the ballot for any one seat. And I would welcome it. I would welcome 5 candidates running for the school board seats.
Well, You're saying 5 could run for the school board seats because the parties don't have to have a primary because at the school board level, they're not backed by party affiliation.
Correct.
So you could conceivably have 3 folks that lean left and 3 folks that lean right running for the same district or the at-large seat.
All it takes is 200 signatures.
All it takes is 200
And
signatures.
it's not 200 signatures of people that'll vote for you. It's 200 signatures of people who want to see you on the ballot.
200 people that want to see you on the ballot within your district.
Within your district.
Within your district. At large is different, though.
At large is different. It's all throughout the county.
All throughout the county. Connie Sylvester watching the program. Oh, Judith's going to give her some props.
Love you, Connie.
I believe Connie is very active in the local GOP. She says school board will be very well contested. And she says count on it.
Well, it's important to recognize that nationally and statewide, 2 days ago, the Loudoun County superintendent was fired by the school board, and this morning I heard an actuality where a person involved in that said, well, that's not enough, we need the whole school board fired. So I think school boards have become quite the firestorm across the nation. And it goes back to masking of kids, and it goes back to the gubernatorial contest, and what's the proper role for parents in curriculum development, and how many folks
Transportation.
Transportation. I've heard people railing about long bus rides and delayed buses. I've heard it on this program, I think. But the idea of schools and how they spend their money and how they allocate time is critically important to those with children. It is a very visceral thing. People have strong opinions, and they should, about the education of their children.
The Loudoun County superintendent was fired for, frankly, being disingenuous. The Loudoun County superintendent, there were two circumstances of, I got to choose my words carefully here, of sexual abuse. In each circumstance, they were at different schools. The first example of sexual abuse involved a student who was birthed male, but later identified female, going into a bathroom after identifying as female and abusing another female within the bathroom. The superintendent of Loudoun County was not straightforward in revealing the first circumstance of abuse, sexual abuse, and instead positioned this student in another school, and that information got out. And as a result of that information getting out, including email exchanges with the school board about this topic, the superintendent was later fired. So that is something that's becoming, that's frankly becoming national news and not just Virginia news.
That's absolutely true, and there are significant nuances to the story and what is the right place for HIPAA and privacy, what is the right place for public safety and the safety of the other students. And you've seen from, I think I've shared with you, that there's been designs of unisex bathrooms being developed so that this can be avoided. So there's not a single answer, but I think that those battles are occurring in school boards across the nation.
Henrico County considering unisex bathrooms as we speak, and that's certainly one to be the hot button issues for the 4 seats that are up for election in Albemarle County.
Asking the question.
Yeah.
You have a limited CIP, capital improvement plan. Do you build additional classroom space, or do you build unisex bathrooms?
Or do you raise the pay of bus drivers to get a full fleet of drivers?
Or do you raise the pay?
Or do you raise the pay of teachers to keep the teachers from quitting? Or do you green light collective bargaining, which empowers the teachers to kind of determine their education, their professional destiny?
Or do you expand the number of children in the classroom to expand the capacity of the school?
Or do you do the learning cottages as a stopgap?
You have to do them. That part is state code.
So these are the points we're making here, that this is going to be a very, and this is very important to emphasize. In November of 2023, there are 4 spots up for grabs. Those 4 spots determine a majority, potentially, if they're done in unison. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but those 4 people are the majority of a 7-person board. So you can make a legitimate argument that schools are the hottest button election topic now, and then the election next year is going to have 4 people or 4 spots up for election that are going to determine the school board and how it votes for the next 4 years.
And will that, and again, because of the way that the Whitehall seat, that will have larger ramifications. Every other election on the school board is a majority vote because it's a 7-member board.
Right, right. And you know, I'm not speaking out of turn here. Well, I'll let him make the announcement about the Whitehall district and his plans for that. What was your take on the fact that 9 people wanted the interim spot?
One, I'm encouraged. I am always encouraged when there are multiple people. I know of several of the people that are moving forward, and they're high-quality people. I read the bios of all of them, and they all seem to be high-quality people, but the ones I know are just as high quality as the others. It's like Wobegon, where all the kids are above average. But the other part of it is it's a very attractive spot. It's like renting a car before you buy it. You can run this and you're like, this isn't for me. It's test driving it. You basically get about 4 months of a test drive before you have to make the decision. But I think it's valuable. I'm really thrilled with the variety of people. I mean, it's not all young moms and dads. It's not all older folks. It's not all retired. There's a real nice mix for the school board to make the selection of who they get to work with for the next year.
How do you characterize, different topic here, how do you characterize the your retail sales report for Q3 of 2022 in regards to Charlottesville City? Second part of the question, the health of Charlottesville City. Charlottesville City just named a new police chief. Michael Rogers could potentially be under contract as the interim city manager through the end of next year, although there's a clause that if council finds a city manager, he can be replaced in the middle or sometime during 2023. Council did, and Lloyd Snook, the mayor, said this in the chair you were sitting in, they wanted to have Michael Rogers through the budget session because they felt that would be beneficial. As opposed to hiring a new city manager and immediately throwing the city manager into budget session, which would be difficult. So Charlottesville City, anywhere you want to go.
All right, well, let's first report from the retail report where it shows Charlottesville City 9% year-to-date growth in their sales tax revenue, and that meant, I want to say it's about $839,000 increase of sales tax revenue. There are problems in Charlottesville. I will tell you, because it was said in a public meeting, which is why you guys pay me. Please donate to Free Enterprise Forum. It's on the website, freeenterpriseforum.org. You pay me to go to these meetings. At the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission meeting, Sally Hudson asked the elected officials around the table, why does it take so long to get a doggone permit and get something built? God bless you, Sally Hudson. The discussion was, Mr. Galloway raised 3 very important concerns about staffing, technology, as well as some challenges on the applications. But another person who I didn't see because I was monitoring via Zoom said, we got personality conflicts. So now we got folks in engineering not talking to folks that are applicants, and neither of the applicants aren't playing nice either. Nobody's being adults in these applications. I thought that was incredible to be said in a public meeting. So we have real issues with getting things done in Charlottesville. That being said, the retail sales tax data put Charlottesville in the middle of the pack for increases in sales tax revenue.
But to your point, Charlottesville 9% up. We're calling 5% inflation, so that's still 4%.
What would you consider appropriate growth?
I mean, I'd say 4% is appropriate growth.
2 to 4% is where most people think is good economic growth.
I'd say that's appropriate growth. Charlottesville's got 3 spots on council. Lloyd Snook, in your chair, announced for the first time that he was going to run for re-election. Reading the tea leaves, we probably don't think Sina McGill's going to run again. Michael Payne, I've been told, and I'm not speaking out of turn here, is contemplating potentially running again. He's contemplating potentially Sally's seat in the Virginia House of Delegates. maybe we want to go down this road, filling Sally's seat. It looks like we have a lot of qualified folks that are at least thinking about it. That's fair.
Fair enough.
Very fair. How do you look at this election, first council, 3 seats up for grab in November, and then filling Sally's seat? Anywhere you want to go on those topics?
Well, first on council, I will say very positive things about the current city council.
Same.
The city council, I really appreciated Mr. Rogers, who at his at the meeting that the chamber held in February said, we want to make government boring again. And by God, he's done it. And that's a good thing. Government being boring is a good thing.
Great thing.
And I don't want to say that that doesn't mean we still don't need a whole lot of work in a lot of areas, but let's do it in a manner in which it's a net positive for all, and all perspectives approaches are appreciated. I believe that running for council this time around is significantly easier having what I consider to be a professional in the interim city manager spot. That I think is the bottom line. I believe that the current city councilors, should they choose to run again, have a strong argument for incumbency being reelected. Whether or not Sina McGill will run again, I have no idea. But I do know that it's a better council today than when they got there.
I think that's good. I think that's fair.
With regard to Sally's seat, as you know, Delegate Hudson has announced that she is running for the new 55th district, Senate district seat.
It's going to be a very competitive Democratic primary with Cree Deeds,
Right,
who's an
and-
institution.
It is an institution,
In fact, Sally called him an institution in her announcement.
a former candidate for governor for
Yeah.
the Democratic Party, a longtime friend of Charlottesville and represented Charlottesville. As he's positioned it, Charlottesville and Albemarle have always been the heart of the district. That's where the votes were, and he's won those votes. The folks that look at it from political science, and we are a nonpartisan organization, but we're talking about political science here, would suggest that Delegate Hudson represents a different wing of the party where Senator Deeds probably puts you in the middle.
Kathy Galvin right there at our door. We could have welcomed her in if we
Sure.
wanted to.
We love Kathy.
Kathy Galvin, if she wants to say hello, we're happy to. Not to put you in a tough spot.
Not me.
No, not you. I'm talking Judah.
Having to get up
Judah's
and
running out. Do you, anything you want to offer of candidates considering for the Virginia House of Delegates in Sally's spot?
If you think it's difficult to get things done on city council, getting things through the General Assembly is even more fun.
So you're saying brutal.
It is a machine. But
Kathy Galvin is in the house. We are doing a live talk show, but we're always happy to host you if you want to come on and offer any perspective here. We got a chair and a mic. Yeah, we're literally live on air, but Kathy Galvin, you're a friend of the network and a friend of the show.
I guess.
We got a chair right here next to Neil
Have a seat,
Williamson.
Kathy. Always good to see you.
It's great to see Kathy Galvin in the house. Judah's going to get a 3-shot ready. Look at the gentleman, Neil Williamson, bringing the chair out. We'll ask Kathy, the architect, here in a matter of moments if she rode her bicycle here. She walked, okay. We're also going to get her take on anything Charlottesville related here in a matter of moments. We're talking Sally Hudson challenging Cree Deeds here, Kathy Galvin. And we're talking about who could potentially fill Sally's spot in the Virginia House of Delegates. There's a lot of names being percolated here. Neil offered tremendous perspective on the third quarter retail sales tax report he positioned on the Free Enterprise Forum. I think we both have tremendous respect for former counselor Kathy Galvin, Neil Williamson.
Absolutely. One of the things that when I would go to specifically the RWSA meetings, if I saw the bike locked up out front, I knew I was late.
You are live on air. We'll get that mic a little closer to you if you could. Why don't you, for the few that don't know you, introduce yourself to those that are watching the program here, Kathy?
And which camera, what do I look?
Your cameras are going to be in the center here.
Okay, well-
Judah's adapting on the fly.
Oh my goodness, thank you, Judah. Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Galvin. I used to be on the Charlottesville City Council. I guess my terms went from 2008 to close to 2020, and I was on the city school board before that. So there was 4 years on school board, 8 years on the city council. So I walked off the dais on December 31st,
Smiling.
2019, and then we got the pandemic, which we all kind of went into lockdown. It gave me a lot of time to regroup and get my head back on straight that I am an architect, an urban designer, and planner, and that is what I'm doing today. I am back in my craft that I spent most of my life in, and I'm very, very happy. And I have a wonderful husband, I have 2 sons, and one of my sons got married in that time frame, and I have a granddaughter, Clara, who's about 4 months old now.
Outstanding.
Yeah. So, life goes on for sure. In fact, it's a very nice life after city council.
For those that don't know, Ms. Galvin is an excellent architect.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen her work over the years prior to school board and times and moving forward, and it's always fascinating to see folks leave council and go on to what they really do and then just shine.
Well, thank you.
It is. It's quite good, and it also was nice on council to have someone with the sensibilities of architecture, which are really looking long term and how the built environment impacts your quality of life.
Well, thank you. That's a high compliment. That was what I was trying to do is employ the skills I had learned as a professional architect, which is a design process, but design is a method of problem solving. So it's a methodical way of listening, assessing, taking in input, and then trying to create with the community a vision. And I think that's right now we're all wondering what the vision is for Charlottesville and even Albemarle County, the whole region.
Well, let's talk Charlottesville with her. I'll also brag a little bit about Kathy Galvin as well. She's fantastic at hosting debates on this network as well.
That's
She did a
right.
fantastic job emceeing that debate. We've been talking about
right.
the health of Charlottesville. Open-ended question. You got a new police chief name. You got 3 spots for council up for grabs in 2023. Mayor Snook in that chair right there said he's going to run for re-election. We have not yet heard from Michael Payne or Sina McGill. We've heard Michael Payne is contemplating potentially Sally Hudson's open seat in the Virginia House of Delegates.
Interesting.
We've also heard Katrina Carlson from the Albemarle County School Board is going to make a very near announcement that she's going to pursue that seat. Dave Norris, friend of the program, gave me a quote that he's very interested in Sally's open seat. Of course, Sally's challenging Cree Deeds, an institution. We got retail sales tax data that's up. A lot of talking points here. What would you like to talk about with Charlottesville?
Well, let's think about what is the vision for the city. And I know full accounting here, I have great respect for anybody that runs for elected office. And being up front, sitting on that dais, you're the one that's privy to all the details, all the complexities behind every decision that has to be made in the public eye. And so consequently, when you make that decision, you're going to have 50% of the community hate you and 50% of the community love you. It's just the nature of the beast. So I have great respect and understanding of the complexity of the problems that elected officials face, especially at the local level. And that said, I do think that we're at a position where everyone's wondering now, what is the council for? We've been hearing a lot about what people have been against. We have succeeded in changing our public spaces with the removal of the statues to the lost cause. But what do we put up instead? What do we put in its place? How do we bring back the quality of public place? We did lots of engagement about the quality and the functionality of our streets. West Main Street, Elliott Avenue. The current council defunded those, returned state money.
West Main Streetscape.
For the West Main's improvement program,
Yep.
as well as, and there was a whole slew of other projects that were completely just defunded. And other communities in the whole Commonwealth of Virginia compete fiercely for the state money, but we saw it go back to the Virginia Department of Transportation. So my question to anybody who's going to be sitting on council, what is it that we're going to be building up? What are we going to be for? What is going to be the vision for the physical and the spiritual, and the spiritual might be too strong of a word. But what is our reason for being as a city? Maybe that's the better way to put it. And I think that we've got really good stable government now. However, I'm concerned about always having interim in front of the city manager. I think that's, and I've said this to some of the councilors, I think that might be a reason why it's still a challenge for us to get people to fill our vacancies, because the interim suggests that this is not permanent. I'm very happy we've got a permanent new police chief. It remains to be seen how well the new chief does. I wish him all the best. And and the whole country is seeing a spike in violence, gun violence. So it's not like we're unique in that regard, but it is frightening, especially with the horrifying death of the 3 UVA students right in front of the architecture school, the arts precinct, where I went as a graduate student to get my master's degree in architecture. So it was quite chilling to know that we're in this state right now. So that's my big issue, is what is, as we're looking to the future, what are we going to be for? And it also, I want to say that we shouldn't be as involved with these zero-sum games where it's equity versus sustainability versus the kind of the quality of the places we build. We need to do all 3 at the same time. And I think at some point we need people on council, we need people on the planning commission, we need people in our city government who understand that is a 3-legged stool. It's not all or nothing. And of course, with my friend here, it's economics matters. We need to always think about the health of the economic health of the city, so that we can be prosperous and we can share that prosperity equally across the community. So I think that's, the whole thing about the delegate race and
that seat
the
intrigued
Senate
you at
race,
one time. That seat intrigued you at one time.
It did, but as we were talking earlier, I'm very happy to be in my role as a professional architect, urban designer, and urban planner. My family is very happy to have me back home, and I'm at the table at dinner now. I'm not just in some public meeting all the time, and the subject has been broached before with me about that seat again, but I just want people to be in that position that know how to reach common ground. I think we have really seen a lot of the nationalization of our local and our state politics, and I want to be really focused on our region. I want a representative of Charlottesville-Albemarle. I want to know and see that person. I want to bump into them. And I know that's something that's usually associated with a local elected official, but at the state delegate level, I think it's really important that person is present.
I want to highlight, you jump in here, I want to highlight friend of the program, John Blair, giving both you guys some props right now from his desk in Stanton. We love you, John Blair. Neil Williamson,
John.
What is on your mind, my friend?
Well, my thoughts are to the idea of seeing the part-time legislators who live full-time here out and about in the community. And there are some that do that better than others. One of my kids are now grown, but one of the things that I laughed at or cherished going to the Jefferson Swim League held out at UVA, you would see Rob Bell ringing his bell because that was where the constituents were. And he would be there for 2 days ringing that bell. And, and I would talk to him, of course, and the like, and others would too. And it is true, more true on the local level. You run into city councilors walking down the street or Board of Supervisors members in the grocery store.
Yeah.
But I still run into delegates going around places, and it is a part-time legislature does that. The challenge is, as we get closer and closer to a full-time legislature and a full-time city council and a full-time Board of Supervisors, they're demanded to be at our WSA meetings at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yes.
And demanded to be out. When I'm at the grocery store, you're at a public meeting because that's the time for the public meeting. So I think that the demands placed on our officials is important to recognize sometimes precludes the constituent
Very good
contact. That being said, I think that you of course want to have somebody who has a good understanding. I oftentimes am impressed with folks that run full businesses. They're their old sole proprietor. I think of Chris Runyon, for instance, over in Mountain, owns a sign company. That 2 months out of the year he works in the General Assembly. The rest of the time he's over doing his thing. And I see him at Farm Bureau meetings and other meetings. But in general, he has an understanding of meeting a payroll. And I think too many of our local officials and state officials never had to meet a payroll. And it is, as one who's done it 3 or 4 times, Mr. Miller has done it a couple of times, having to write checks. It is humbling and gratifying at the same time. And it is part of the American dream that I don't want our legislature to lose.
Great comment. What are your thoughts on that?
Again, that was the whole point of the citizen legislator, right? That you are part of the community, and as we've grown the responsibilities with all the boards and commissions that local elected officials have to sit on, and also this committee work, a lot of it for the delegate and the senator, and I do understand the geography is bigger, for sure, when you're dealing at the state level. That said, I don't necessarily think that a person has to be in business to understand and have an understanding and empathy and appreciation for the business community. And I do think that you don't have to be a professional architect, urban designer, and planner to understand the importance of having streets and land uses and built environments that work well for the community. You do need to be able to reach out and be with those professional communities to get their insights to inform your decision making. And that's the thing that I think we share, is that it's endless coffees, it's endless moments where you are available to the community. And it's not, of course, it's a little bit, you think back on the last 3 years of the pandemic, that really did put a kibosh on a lot of personal interactions. So, but right now, I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of retail politics for these contenders for the House of Delegates. I want to see you. I want to talk with you. I think I'm not alone in that. And also, I know Sally and I know Cree. That's going to be, I think Cree has done a very excellent job. So it'll be interesting to see how Ms. Hudson distinguishes herself in that race.
How important do you think fundraising is in that race?
And I'll add to this specifically. The talk is a $250,000 donation minimum from Sonia Smith to that race, to Sally Hudson. And the talk is that donation could go as high as $500,000. That's an astronomical amount of money for a race like that.
Well, the General Assembly never got to the point where they exacted a maximum level of contribution, which I think they should.
Yeah.
It was something that I worked and promoted when I was running, and it does make it very difficult to get out and meet the people when you have to be on a phone raising money. And if your opponent doesn't have to do that, your opponent can be out meeting people while you are out raising money to get the ads out there that you need to fund to keep up with the competition. So I still think that there needs to be a cap. I think the North Carolina General Assembly has that, and I think other states do, where you just, at least at the state level, free us up from that kind of magnitude of big money. But even at the local level, boy, when I ran for school board back in 2007, 2008, I think I ran my campaign for like $3,000.
I remember a campaign for Greene County Board of Supervisors. The chair ran, and he said, I'm going to spend $215 on signs. If it costs more than that, I'm going to lose.
You know what the benchmark is now for school board in Albemarle County? School board's benchmark is $50K.
Oh my goodness.
Board of Supervisors benchmark is $100K.
Oh my goodness.
For campaigns.
Again, my local city council elections, I was at topped 20,000. And that was the second one. The first one was less. So I think it's something to be aware of. And I do think that there's also a moment when the ads and the commercials that you put out there, there's only so much impact you're going to have.
They become noise.
And I think people throw your literature away.
I think so
quite
too.
Frankly,
Yeah.
So I mean, I know I do that. I
Me
mean,
too.
It's like you've got to be conversant in the issues. I think the most important thing is to have debates. Get out in the public eye so that people can really understand the differences between the candidates. And I think that was a little disappointing to me personally at the last round of city council elections. There were some forums, but there weren't that many, and the quality of the questions didn't get into any real deep issues like, budget issues, the contest between this and that, and how would you, not that what your choice would be, but how do you make your decision about what to do? I think we need to understand people's method of decision making, their method of problem solving, as not so much their positions on issues. Let's find out how they get to that position on that issue so that in the future when that hot issue goes away, the next one is going to be dealt with in a very intelligent, cogent way that can then be communicated to you in a compelling way.
As one who sat as a moderator for one of those or two of those interviews/debates, Sean Tubbs and I tried to get to some of that.
You did a good job with that.
But there is a bit of a, for lack of a better term, a coronation that occurs in Charlottesville with the Democratic Party choosing their nominees. And we made a point to have a forum during the candidate selection for the Democratic primary as well as during the actual general election. So do you think that the Democratic Party has too much of a stronghold in Charlottesville?
Ooh, tough question.
That's a tough question,
Yeah.
and I'm going to
Scotty's a Democrat.
bring up a very tough issue. And full disclosure, I am a Democrat. I think, and I mentioned the word nationalization of local and state politics. I think the Republican Party has got a reckoning to do with its national politics, and until they do that, it's going to permeate down into the state and local level, and so the brand matters. I must say that I'm not the only one talking about and wondering what is the state of the Republican Party today. And so I think before we can even answer that question, at this point in time, whether or not one party or another has a stronghold in Charlottesville, let's make sure we have a party that understands and values constitutions and the rule of law, and that we're going to then make sure that we have the ability to work together on problem solving. And I agree, there's been far too much partisanship And I think there have been some examples at the national level. The infrastructure bill, for one, comes to mind, where you had some great legislation that was forged by both parties coming together. And I do think that I would love to see more of that at the state level. And if there was, right now, in our politics, the Republican brand is quite frankly tarnished.
Well, you're echoing John Sununu, Governor John Sununu's comments this morning, but the question, I guess, is when I look at, I've been doing this too long, I guess. I've been doing this 20 years now, and over your time, when was the last really contested elections for Charlottesville, general election, for Charlottesville City Council that was competitive?
Outside of a Democratic primary, you mean?
Yeah.
Outside of
the
a
general election.
Okay, general election.
Well, again, the Democratic, any primary is the gauntlet people have to run
Had to
through.
be Schilling, right?
And I guess it was Rob Schilling. And I think before that you had, who was before Rob Schilling?
It was back to the late 60s, wasn't
Late
it?
60s, yeah.
So the point being that this isn't a new phenomena, and it's not a new phenomena in many urban centers that there is a party that tends to have both. It could be a Republican city or a Democratic city, but generally it's more Democratic in the urban areas. That being said, I'm also one who says, people get mad and they say, well, they're all Democrats up, they're all going to vote the same. I said, you have never seen 5 more diverse Democrats than City Council. When you were on it, you had quite there was a spectrum.
There was a spectrum, yes.
That's put
Well,
delicately.
And I think there's a really sound argument to be made that local elections shouldn't be partisan.
Okay, that was the follow-up I was going to say. How does someone running as an independent have a chance? And then to your question, which you took it from my mouth, maybe elections in Charlottesville and Albemarle County School Board is nonpartisan. Does that nonpartisan aspect need to start creeping into council, board of supervisor races as well?
I think as you get further up the chain, I don't know if you're going up to the food chain or down the food chain. I don't know. I think at the local level, because you are the representative of everybody in the community within which you live, I found it very important for me to listen to everybody and be the representative for everybody. And that didn't matter whether they were Republican, Democrat, or independent. It didn't matter what their zip code was or what their religion or color of their skin was. I think the further up the food chain you go, if that's the right phrase, the further up in level of government you go, the more removed you are from the people you serve. It's just the nature of the geography. And so then you wind up dealing with the party, as Edmund Burke said, is the vehicle to mediate all those differences.
But if we go down that road, what would you say to a ward system?
I'm not. Award systems, again, have usually been part of a bigger geography. And when you look at the
We should highlight what a ward system is.
a ward system is a subset of a jurisdiction that has its own representative that's elected by the people that live within that ward. And when I say it's the geography matters, the size matters. So Charlottesville's very small, and it's only 10 square miles. I find if it's a bigger city, you begin to start seeing some value, I think, to having that close-in representation. But for when you're dealing with a city like D.C., I mean, when one of their wards could be the size of Charlottesville, it's a different ballgame. So I feel like it's a function of the almost like per capita representation that. Again, I'm looking at this from a planner standpoint right now. So I'm not prepared to think about the whether the ward system's better or being an independent or Republican or Democratic primary partisan system is better. I want to get to the point where people are representing to the public what their what their platform is, and what their agenda that they've heard is the agenda of the community they wish to serve will be, and how they will tackle some of the problems that have surfaced in their conversations with the community. I align with the Democratic Party because I do believe in government. I believe government can be a positive change agent. I believe in giving everyone a fair shot. I believe that having a Dickensian kind of world where we're not acknowledging legacies of past racism and current racism, legacies of exploitation, legacies of just being denied access to opportunity don't matter. So I do believe that government is there to, as much as possible, to level that playing field so that everybody can have a fair shot at the things that this country can provide in terms of, whatever mission you want to pursue, whatever job you want to pursue, and do it in a way that you can support your family, support yourself, and living in a home that's safe, comfortable, and decent, and that you can afford the food that is currently not always that affordable and that healthy. So again, I feel government plays an important role in that, because without some moderating of the environment, it can become very much what I call a Dickensian world where the winner takes all. And so that's why, and right now, the Democratic Party, in my mind, is the party of good government. And I want to hear an alternative from the Republican side, but right now, I'm only hearing that it's the party of one person.
Well, certainly after Trump's announcement, about 10 days ago, that he was going to run for president, I think many in the party said, we thought that era was behind us. Many in the GOP thought that. And he makes this announcement, and to Kathy's point, frankly, tarnishes the brand. Tarnishes the brand and gets the conversation going back in the neighborhood or in the realm of Donald Trump. And that's not great for the party, the national level, and to her point, that trickles down to the local level undoubtedly.
It always does. It always does. But I would say that, as a famous New Yorker said, there's not a Republican or Democratic way to fix a pothole. It needs to be fixed. And quite frankly, right now in Charlottesville, a lot of things need to be fixed.
Carol Thorpe, we've dubbed her the queen of Jack Jewett, the Jack Jewett district. She says the Democratic majority on city council is more than 5 decades old. Politics of late has had nothing to do with that. She's highlighting the stranglehold that the Democratic Party has on Charlottesville, and it certainly has a stranglehold on Albemarle County as well. How does an independent win an election in either jurisdiction?
I think you should ask Nikia Walker.
And some are
she was an independent.
This is me talking here. I thought Nikia Walker, in a lot of ways, won in circumstances that were an anomaly. Fresh out of August 12, 2017, a time that had never been really experienced here in Charlottesville. And in a lot of ways, that was her springboard to winning a spot on council, A12, 2017. Bellamy Brown, who is certainly very centrist in his ideology, ran as an independent, and he lost. And he lost convincingly.
I would suggest, again, being the political scientist as a nonpartisan here, I would suggest that many of the methodologies or philosophies regarding communication that Donald Trump utilized to gain the primary and win, Mayor Walker used throughout her time, going directly to the voters, not going through the party apparatus, doing Facebook Live, retail politics, being there. I will say that when Heather was running, I would see her at community meetings. I remember specifically a meeting at Union Baptist Church that was a rather heated meeting, and it was not comfortable to be there. And she was there, and she was proud to be there, and as were one or two other members of council, as I recall, but she took a bit of a beating at that meeting. And so the being there is one manner in which an independent can make or break a campaign. The independent needs to have a persona that allows them to do that, and a communication strategy that reaches out across all platforms.
I think I agree with that.
I agree
I think it's the quality of what you offer. And so I remember when I was running, the first slogan I had, greener, smarter, stronger. And that seems very old-fashioned and quaint right now, but I even had like a little bicycle wheel spoke as my logo. But people understood that. Greener. Okay, greener is being very much focused on climate, the environment, and how can we make a city that if not is helping, at least not contributing to the problem of global climate change. And smarter is about good government, making sure we've got the right kind of decision-making tools, right, from a strategic plan to written and clear comprehensive plans. And stronger was the economy, and that I contended that we only are strong as people that have been left behind. So I really worked hard, and one of my proud things to say is that I worked hard to get that job center in place, and that it was Drury Brown was one of my inspirations to get finally a downtown job center that really, and it was also inspired by Rich Schuyler's Orange Dot project. That, wait a minute, we can do better than this, and we can get to the point where we hire an awful lot of our underemployed people and get them the tools they need to get up and out of poverty. And so that's what the stronger is. We're as strong as our most vulnerable and left behind are strengthened. So that stuck with me the whole time. And it was very helpful, because anyone that's running a campaign needs to know how to get to their 3 buckets and needs to know how to do that elevator speech. And so getting a very clear message that's aligned with your values but actually can be translated into pragmatic, on-the-ground change is critical. And that's what I'm going to be looking for. And you can be a Republican, independent, or a Democrat. But right now, the Democratic Party, and again, everyone talks about the stranglehold of the Democratic Party on Charlottesville. I think there's not like a screening mechanism other than the primaries. And the primaries are hard on Democrats as they are on Republicans because the primaries will always bring out the most extreme elements of either party.
Always.
And so you're winding up squeezing out those centrists that are the centrists of a Democratic Party and the centrists of a Republican Party are the ones that create those long-standing achievements like an infrastructure bill. So I think it's the onus is on those that complain about being on the outs of power. If power is your only thing, you're lost already. It's got to be about what are you going to do for the public? What are you going to do to make this the most sustainable, the most equitable, and I'm going to just say the most beautiful city in Central Virginia? And that's what we need. That's what we need to hear. And, as I just heard recently, why is even this need to be discussed? It's like these are the basics that we all need to understand about a candidate who's going to be running for office.
What do you think, Neil?
I think the big challenge in what I consider to be any locality that has one-party dominance is the ideas and nominating people who can win in November. What happens with the primary system is you nominate people that win the firehouse primary or win the convention, and then they are representing the people that elected them for the primary, and that was not the people that will come around and vote in mass for them in November. So the idea of any party thinking about the general during the primary is critically important.
And also, I do want to talk about there's the reality of the geography of our demographics. And I forget who coined the phrase "the big sort," but we are starting to see this all over the country where people of certain political identities and persuasions are seeking to live with each other. And so there are places in Virginia that a Democrat would say, there's a Republican stronghold, I can't get in. And the same argument that is being made about Charlottesville by the Republican Party. I think you need to look at your demographics, and you look at, and there's been polling over the last midterms as to why didn't the red wave happen? Because demographics matter, and what you look at is what's going on in your suburban locality, regions of your localities, what's happening in your inner cities, what's happening in your rural areas. Those dynamics matter.
The political dynamics comparing the gubernatorial race by district to the midterms is fascinating for policy wonks to see what went where and what changed. Those are the minutia that people that really don't have lives like me look at and understand that it's all politics are local, but the locality, as you were speaking about earlier, is changing. And am I in favor of that change, or am I pushing back against that change? And so understanding that those dynamics is critically important to winning elections.
Yes, and I think when you look at college towns, university towns, you're going to have a preponderance of people who are much more of a liberal orientation, and that's just a fact. So in that sense, then alternatives to the party that most identifies with the more liberal-minded community, that contender the onus is on that contender to say, well, why am I better? Why is my platform better? And as I just said earlier on in the discussion, at the last presidential election, the only platform the Republican Party offered up was one man, Donald Trump. That was not a platform. No one knew. And then before the midterms, when Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell was asked, what is the agenda, what is the platform for the Republican Party? I'll tell you after the midterms. My goodness, that's not good politics. That's rotten politics. We need to know what you stand for. And I know the guy that did put up, Rick Scott, put up, in my view, an atrocious platform, but he put one up there, gutting our safety net that we have had since, FDR. So I think we can't just talk about power bases and strangleholds. What is it that you're offering that's going to make this a community where all people can thrive, where all children can thrive? That is the bottom line, not who's in power, because then we might as well just be autocracies, because that's all about power.
Well, and I would push back a little bit on the ward idea, and I know we're running low on time, but
we are. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
I broke up the
Kathy,
stream of thought here.
You're great. The idea, if again, policy wonks that spend a lot of time looking at maps of where city councilors have come from and where they come from in the city versus where they don't, is a very interesting dynamic that's worthwhile of examination. That's all.
So what he's saying right there is you're seeing a lot of the city councilors coming from affluent neighborhoods and not necessarily neighborhoods that represent voters in the community that may be on the financial margin, is what he's saying right there. Now, also to push back on the ward system, you could potentially have the professional politician. And that's one of the pushbacks on raising the pay for council and the board of supervisors, is having the professional politician that's in place for many, 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 many terms. Now, the counter to that argument, at least in Albemarle County, Supervisor Ann Malick's been, 4 terms? Diantha McKeel, this is her 3rd term. Supervisor Galloway, this is his 2nd term. So while the pay is not great, we still see some professional politicians in Albemarle County, not necessarily in Charlottesville City. You want to add something to that?
Well, just saying that the flip side of that is when you have turnover constantly, more power
Institutional memory goes away.
to staff, but
Yeah.
more power goes to staff. And Charlottesville, not recently, but for the longest time, had long-term city managers. And those long-term city managers had a pretty heavy hand. Sometimes I would suggest one city manager put forth a vote every time even a rock color had to be decided, what was then known as the Meadow Creek Parkway, and it was always a 3-2 vote. But I'm never making a decision on this. Council will vote on everything. And so the idea of city management being professional and being long-term is also a benefit, or county management is a benefit when you have people turning over the elected offices. And I'm not saying one's one or the other, but when we talk about term limits on the federal side, we talk about staff having more power when they have a change of boss every 2 terms.
And and I know you're short on but just a little bit for the civics of this all. I mean, we are in a city manager form of government. And so the idea is that your executive is not elected. Your executive branch is not elected in localities in Virginia. And you do have your legislative branch, essentially, is the councils and the boards of supervisors. They are elected. And then whatever happens to the judiciary branch is another story. Councils wind up getting stuck being in that role a lot. So most people are familiar at the federal level, right, and the state level. You do have a strong executive, you do have a legislature, and you do have a judicial branch. But local governments are different, and because of the strong city manager form of government we have, and I do see that when you have a good, strong city manager, that is a way to actually get things done.
No doubt.
And so, in that sense, that the lane that that council should play is the policy making. Don't get into the lane of being the executive, and that's, I contend, when I started seeing some of the most challenging moments on council is when that line got blurred, and it can get blurred because no one's making a decision and executing. And that's the problem. We've got to have a strong executive who, once the policy is made, it's up to that executive to figure out how to execute that policy.
Do you think the city manager gets hired before the next election cycle is completed? Michael Rogers technically under contract through 2023, but there's a clause in there that if current council chooses a city manager that's permanent, then that hire would replace Michael Rogers. Do you think that happens before November? These 5 councilors wanting to make this decision before 3 others can potentially come on the dais.
I am going to side with the idea that we need to do what's best for the city.
So wait till after the election. Where the 3 people then get 4-year terms. Because right now, it could be a lame duck city manager chosen if that decision was made before the 3 come on January 1.
And my hesitation about that, though, is that does the interim manager have authority to actually execute things, or is it still another holding pattern that has been kind of instituted for the last few years?
The executive police chief.
That's true, but also I was advocating early on that work on getting your permanent city manager first, and that city manager needs to be the one who hires the police chief.
So was I.
I believe council is comfortable with
Michael Rogers.
And will stay comfortable with Michael Rogers, and will allow the new council to select the new city manager.
And,
That's what you think?
And I am not opposed to that. I did run into one of the councilors walking as he was walking his dog, and I was going out for my afternoon walk. I said, "What are you for? What's on the ground? What's going to happen?" Because now they're going to be dealing with major capital investments on the schools.
Yep.
We've still got to fix those streets. And we're looking at a comp plan and a zoning ordinance that is going to make us potentially more people living here.
More dense, for sure.
And you cannot have more people living here without having your infrastructure in place to handle it. we were going to be, that's what happened with West Main Street early on. You know, in 2003 when the zoning was changed to increase density along West Main Street, they edited out all of the street improvements that were supposed to have been done that were recommended by the corridor study from 2000. And then we moved forward to try to get an improvement plan again in place with new zoning in place, which we got the new zoning, but we were advised by the planning department at the time, oh, we don't need to be concerned about the roads because we've got a separate improvement plan. But no, the new zoning was put in place, and the improvement plan never got implemented. And so now we've got new zoning that's even more intense than the 2003 zoning, and still have sidewalks that aren't wide enough for one person with a dog to walk on.
This is going to get Neil. Neil wants to jump in, I can tell right here. You do not want to jump in on this one? This is the chicken.
Looking at the clock on the wall.
I see that. I see the chicken and an egg of density before infrastructure, or infrastructure before density. That's how we started today's show.
Oh, interesting. Well, you know, we have a transportation planner now. I'm hoping that starts feeding in. We've got to get ahead of this game. And I understand the importance of redevelopment. I want to see all those parking lots redeveloped before we start building on floodplains. My goodness.
High Street right there. Kathy Galvin is fantastic. Neil Williamson is fantastic. No, she was walking by here. She came in and she made the show better.
Absolutely.
Well, that's kind of you. Well, I enjoy talking with you, both of you.
We love having you here. Neil Williamson, president of the Free Enterprise Forum. Support his work. There's a donation button on the Free Enterprise Forum website. Please support Neil Williamson. When you see Kathy Galvin around town, stop her and tell her she did a great job.
Oh.
We're huge fans of her on this show. And then pick her brain. She loves to talk Charlottesville and the nuances of this jurisdiction. Judah Wickhauer adapted on the fly.
Thank
Getting
you.
a 3-shot and a lower third set up on the fly. Well done, Judah Wickhauer. This is Real Talk with Keith Smith, who is working on his business plan and back next week. The I Love Seville show is up in a very close 34 minutes. Thank you kindly for joining us.
Thank
so long,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
It was awesome. He's going to let us know when the mics are off. I'm glad you jumped in here.
Well, thank you. I just was wishing you happy holidays.